Fredric Vetterli. You really can't find a lot of information on this gentleman. I've looked around on the internet and you just hear little footnotes and phrases about him, but out of one of my books, the most information I got about him was he was born in 1822 in Wageshausen in Switzerland. He served an apprenticeship as a gunsmith in Staffelhausen, and then he traveled throughout Europe, working both in Paris and in London as a gunsmith and studying what at the time was cutting-edge technology, the needle fire guns, especially the Dreiser. The Germans developed that in the 1840s, and that was a pretty huge technological advancement, and it was a bolt-action rifle with a paper cartridge that it fired. So he kind of specialized in bolt-action firearms. And at the age of 43, he was offered a position in the Swiss arsenals in Neuhausen, which later became SIG. The Swiss were looking for a modern replacement for their Milbank Amsler stopgap conversions of percussion muzzle-loading rifles, and I believe they also used a Peabody Martini, which was also in the 10.4 by 38 millimeter rimfire. Vetterli not only wanted to improve upon German and French needle fire concepts, but also produce a quick loading weapon. In 1866, he designed his distinctive bolt-action rifle firing a metallic cartridge, which in the era of the Dreiser and Chassepot needle guns was one of the first true bolt-action rifles. Other nations adopted bolt-action rifles shortly afterwards. The Mauser 1871, which is single shot, the Gras model 1874, the Beredin II, the Russian Beredin II in 1879, were all single shot rifles. It is remarkable that in 1868, the Swiss became the first country to embrace a magazine loading rifle with the introduction of the Vetterli with a tubular 12-round magazine system similar to that of the 1866. Now they used a 10.4 by 38 millimeter rimfire cartridge because I guess Vetterli suggested it would be easier. They're already using the ammunition in the older guns, the Milbank Amsler and the Peabody Martini, so the Swiss didn't have to develop a new cartridge. And that's kind of how he got his claim to fame. They say that he designed his bolt as a modification of several other guns. One in particular was the Dreiser needle fire system, and he kind of like took a lot of different features of different designs and incorporated them into his own. And I'll go more into that and what he ended up with the Swiss Vetterli, but I'll show you a couple examples of a gun he designed prior, the model 1867 rifle. Not a very clear picture of it, but this is what an 1867 designed Vetterli rifle looked like. It was his first design, and it was rejected by the Swiss government. As you can see, it's a bolt-action gun, has a tube magazine, like the Vetterlis we know, but it has an exposed hammer. And here is a diagram of the internal components. You see his bolt is there, his lift gate mechanism in that really isn't changed. And there's kind of a picture of the bolt, the firing pin. This here is the rimfire pin, just like we're used to. But if you see, the bolt handle went on a hex. And here's that locking mechanism. It went on the back of the bolt, just like that one. But it must have been secured with a hex. And then he used a hammer mounted inside the wrist, which is almost identical to the 1866. I'll show you a couple pictures of that. Okay, here's a photograph of the Winchester 1866 and the Swiss Vetterli as we know it, the 69 and forward, where he got rid of the hammer. He had a bolt that cocked by closing the bolt. It was all internal, didn't have an exposed hammer. But I guess he was impressed with that 1866, and he incorporated the tubular magazine, which was similar. But as you see from the photograph of this rifle to the first one he designed, 1867, you see where he got his ideas from. Okay? So that was his claim to fame as an engineer and how he come up with that. Now they did say that the Dreiser needle fire rifle was something he also, that's somehow the bolt, how he come up with the bolt design or something. Part of it, he was very influenced by this rifle. And here's a detail of the Dreiser firing mechanism. I guess the locking lugs or something, there was this and I think the Greener rifle. Somehow he came up with his locking lugs and the tubular receiver studying from these various different designs which were considered cutting edge back at the 1850s, 1860s. So that's about the story on him. I give a little story about Fredric Vetterli, who he was, and how he kind of come about and learned about guns, a lot about history, a lot about how he went around and worked with different innovative designers. And that's how it come about when he went back home to Switzerland of developing the Swiss Vetterli rifle.